Okay, so what we're working with on this section, part 2, is we are going to start dealing with negative exponents, and then what happens when you have dividing things. What do you do with dividing? Okay? All right, so again, just like we did before, and before we fill out the rules, we're just going to kind of look at the problems. This rule, though, we do need to know. You're not allowed to have negative exponents. When you have a negative exponent, you're going to move it. So if it's on the top, it's going to move to bottom. And same thing on a negative exponent that's on the bottom. You have to move it, so it's going to move to the top. Okay? When you move it, you have to make it positive. If you don't make it positive, it's just going to keep moving back and forth, back and forth. So once you move it, you change it to a positive. All right, so let's look here. So this has a negative exponent, so that has to move to the top. So this becomes 5x squared x to the third, all over 1, because there was nothing else there. So really, I don't need that over 1 anymore, so I'm just going to simplify it, and this becomes 5x to the fifth. All right, this next one, this is my negative exponent, and right now, you may not see it, but it's a fraction. It's a fraction over 1. And so this has to go on the bottom. So it becomes 3 over x to the fourth, and then the y and the z to the third stay on the top. All right, let's look at the next one, the third one. For the third one, I have a negative number. That's okay. You only move negative exponents. So I'm going to move this one, and so it becomes negative 2x squared over y to the third. And if you notice, everything I move, I'm changing the sign. All right, one last one. My negative exponents are here and here. So let's start with this top. It's going to become 3x squared. This y is going to go on the bottom, so I'm going to throw it on the bottom. And then now the negative 4 stays down here. This x squared is going to move to the top, and that y stays on the bottom. And now I just, whoa, hold on. I lost something. What else was down here? Oh, y was here. And so now what I have to do is I have to just combine my stuff. So I have a 3, I have 4 x's on top, a negative 4, and 4 y's on the bottom. And that's the answer. Okay, so when you have negative exponents, you move them. All right, now dividing. This is one where I want to expand it like we did with multiplying in exponents, because it'll help you see. So I got x's on 2 x's on top, 4 y's on top, and a z. Treat that line there. And then I have 3 x's, a y, and a z. Now what happens is if I have something on the top, it's just like doing 7 divided by 7. Well, 7 divided by 7 is just 1, because I have 1 7 on top, 1 7 on the bottom. So what happens here is I can actually eliminate things I have. So I have that pair of x's, so that's gone. And I have that pair of x's, so that's gone. I have a pair of y's, so that's gone. And a pair of z's, so that's gone. So what's left over on the top is 3 y's, an x, and that's it. It's an x is on the bottom. All right, so here, 2, and then I have 4 x's, a y, and then 3 z's, a 6, 1 x, 4 y's, and a z. Okay, so when you do numbers, you have to actually reduce. I can divide this by 2 and divide this by 2. And so I get 1 over 3. Okay, and so now I have this x and that x is gone. So on the top, I'm left with 3 x's. I have a y and y is gone. So on the bottom, I'm left with 3 y's. And then I have a z and a z that's gone. So on the top, I'm left with z squared. And that's it. So now let's look and see what happened. I had 2 x's on top and 3 on the bottom. I was able to cross off 2, so I was left with 1 on the bottom. Well, 2 minus 3 is equal to 1. And since there was more on the bottom, it stayed on the bottom. For my y's, I had 4 here and 1 on the bottom. Oops. 4 minus 1 is 3, and since there was more on top, it's on top. Another way you can look at it is if I have x squared over x to the third. So what you should be noticing is that when you divide, you're going to subtract the exponents. And so this becomes x to the 2 minus 3, which is x to the negative 1. And remember, negative exponents move, so that's why that one went to the bottom. Okay? All right, so this one, we're going to try doing it without this line. Let's see if we could do this rule where we subtract. Let's make one over here. So x to the 5th over x squared is equal to x 5 minus 2, which is x to the 3rd. Okay, so negative 4 divided by 2 is a negative 2. Since the number on top is bigger, the negative 2 is going to stay on top. Okay, I have 1x on top and 3 on the bottom. 1 minus 3 is a negative 2. And so since it's negative, that tells you it's going to go on the bottom. A lot of times what I do, though, is I just say 3 minus 1 is 2. And since there was more on the bottom, it stays on the bottom. I have 3 y's on top, 1 on the bottom. 3 minus 1 is 2. And again, since there was more on the top, the 2 y's stay on the top. And then the z's, there's nothing to do. I don't mean to cross it off, so it's just z to the 4th. Okay. All right, so now we have problems where we have to simplify. Now, these problems have a lot of different steps. My recommendation is always to kind of take care of the negative exponents first. It's an easier process. So I'm going to have to move this one, and I'm going to move this one. So I get 4x to the 3rd y over 2x squared y to the 3rd. Okay, so now I need to reduce. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Since the 4 is bigger, it's going to stay on top. I have 3 x's on top, 2 on the bottom. I could take away 2, so I'm left with 1. And since there's more on the top, my x stays on the top. And then for y's, I have 1 on top, 3 on the bottom. 1 minus 3 is 2. And since there's more on the bottom, the 2 y's stay on the bottom. Okay, I'd like you to try number 2. First thing I want you to do is move your exponents, and then I want you to try and reduce it. Once you think you have it, go ahead and press play. All right, so you should have gotten negative 3x to the 4th y to the 3rd over 6x to the 5th y squared. And now you're going to reduce. Negative 3 and 6. 3 goes into 6 2 times. But since the bigger number's on bottom, the 2 goes on the bottom, and I'm going to throw a negative 1 up front. 4 minus 5 is 1. Since there's more on the bottom, the x stays on the bottom. 3 minus 2 is 1. Since there's more on top, the y stays on top, and that is the answer. Okay, so when we have exponent to exponent, my suggestion is I always reduce inside if I can first. And then I take care of the exponents, kind of like parentheses where you do the stuff inside the parentheses first. So I have 3 on top, 1 on the bottom. So that means I'm going to have 2 left on top because there was more on top. I have 4 y's on the bottom, 2 on the top. 4 minus 2 is 2. But since there was more on the bottom, they're going to be on the bottom. And then z's, I only have 2 z's on the bottom, so I just write those. Now I bring down my 3. And now I go ahead and take care of my exponent. So exponent to exponent, that becomes x to the 6th over y to the 4th, z to the 6th. And that's the answer. Make my z full of my syrup. So by reducing it, it makes it a little easier before you distribute that exponent to exponent. Okay, so I would like you to try 4 and 5. I would like you to take care of your things inside. So you're going to start off by moving your negative exponents and reducing, and then you're going to take care of the 2. For this one, you're going to take care of the inside, you're going to move the negative exponents and reduce, and then you're going to take care of the negative 3, and I may need to help you with that. But go ahead and try 4 and 5. Let's see how far you get, and when you think you're ready, press play. Okay, so inside, you should have gotten 4x to the third over negative 8x squared, y to the third. Now, 4 divided by 8 is 2. Since the bigger number's on the bottom, the 2 is going to go on the bottom. So I have to have a negative somewhere, so I throw the negative 1 on top. I have 3 x's on top, 2 on the bottom, so there's 1 left over, and it has to be on top because there's more on top. And then on the bottom I have 2 y's and 3 y's, which makes 5. And now I bring down my exponent, and I'm going to take this everywhere. So negative 1 squared is 1. X squared is x squared. And I take it down here. 2 squared is 4. And 5 times 2 is 10. And that's it. Okay? Alright, over here. Hopefully you started out by, let me change colors. Hopefully you started out by moving things inside, so it becomes x to the 4th, y to the 4th, over 6x to the 5th, y squared. And again, I still have something to do. I need to reduce. 3 divided by 6 is 2, but since the bigger number's on bottom, the 2 goes on the bottom. I got 4 x's on top, 5 on the bottom. So that means I have 1 left, and since the bigger one's on the bottom, my x is on the bottom. And then I have 4 y's on top, 2 y's on the bottom. And so that's going to give me 2 y's on the top. Now, if you notice I'm bringing this to the negative 3, that means this whole thing is flipping. So I'm going to get the 2x on top, the y squared on the bottom. That takes care of the negative. Now I just take the 3 everywhere. So 2 to the third is 8 because it's 2 times 2 times 2 again. So it's 8x to the third over y to the 6th. So when you have a negative exponent out here, I flip the whole thing and then I distribute the exponent. Okay, number 6, this one's a little different. There's no parentheses, but what I'll do is I'll always put everything in the top together, and then I'll put everything in the bottom together. So top times top, bottom times bottom. So when I look at the top, 2 times 3 is 6. I have 1x here and 2 here, so I have a total of 3 x's. I have 3 y's and 1 y, so that's a total of 4 y's. And then on the bottom, I have no numbers, but 2 x's and 1 x is 3x. 4 y's and 4 y's is 8 y's. And now I just have to reduce. So the x's are gone, and so I'm left with 6. 4 y's on top, 8 on the bottom. There's 4 left, and they have to be on the bottom because there was more on the bottom. And that's it. So the rules you have to remember is the first thing I always do is I always will take care of negative exponents by moving them. Remember, once you move them, you have to change the sign. And then when you reduce, you need to go ahead and reduce by subtracting your exponents.